Every human life is governed by a constant, silent drainage, a resource that vanishes by the second, moving only in one direction. In a small village, a father watched this process with growing concern. He spent his hours with clear intent, while his son lived in a state of total apathy, seemingly unaware that his own clock was ticking. The son's days followed a predictable, hollow pattern. He wandered through the streets with no destination and no responsibilities, letting entire afternoons dissolve into nothing. Worried that his son's potential was evaporating, the father decided on an intervention. He retrieved an old pocket watch from a cupboard, a physical object to represent an invisible problem. He handed the watch to the boy and gave him a simple task: take it to the market and ask every person he met what they thought it was worth. The boy spent the day collecting a series of guesses. One man offered 500 rupees, another said 1,000, a third insisted on 800. No two people looked at the same object and saw the same value. The boy returned home with a list of prices, but he was still looking at the watch as a mere tool for trade. To him, a day was just like the watch, something that only had value if someone else was willing to pay for it. The next morning, the father handed the watch back to his son. This time, the instructions were different. Go to the market, but don't ask for the price of the watch. Ask for the price of the time inside it. The boy hesitated. The request didn't fit into his understanding of how the world worked. You can price silver and glass, but you can't weigh a minute. He walked back into the crowd and began asking the question. Busy merchants and passing shoppers barely paused to listen before moving on to things they could actually buy. As the hours passed, the boy's confusion turned to a deep sense of isolation. People laughed or told him to go away, calling him a fool for trying to put a price on something so intangible. In a marketplace built on tangible goods, his question sounded like nonsense. The crowd was so focused on what they could hold in their hands that the idea of a ticking lifespan felt like a joke. Near the edge of the market, the boy stepped into a small, quiet shop filled with the sound of thousands of rhythmic clicks. An old watchmaker sat hunched over a workbench. The boy asked his question one last time, bracing for more ridicule. But the watchmaker stopped his work and looked at the boy with a slow, knowing smile. He told the boy that even if he had millions of rupees, he couldn't buy back a single second once it had passed. The supply of a human life is fixed, and it never replenishes. The old man described the two sides of every moment: the fact that it is always leaving us, and the fact that we are the ones who decide exactly how it is spent. Every person, regardless of their status or wealth, receives the same 24 hours when they wake up. The loop resets for everyone, offering the same fixed window of opportunity. Looking at the 24-hour cycle as a rigid, depleting resource changed the way the boy looked at the watch in his hand. It wasn't a tool for telling the time. It was a counter showing him what he was losing. The boy left the shop and walked home, but his pace was different. He wasn't wandering anymore. He moved with a sense of urgency, as if he could finally hear the ticking of the seconds he had been wasting. When he told his father what the watchmaker had said, the man simply placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The lesson didn't need further explanation. The next day, the boy didn't head for the village square to drift through the afternoon. He found work to do. He stayed focused on a task, using his hands for something productive instead of letting them hang idle. He began to treat each hour as an asset he was required to spend. He stopped seeing his days as a limitless supply and started seeing them as a series of specific choices. Time is given to everyone for free, yet it remains the most expensive thing we own. You can spend it, but you can never save it for later. Because every second is non-refundable, the only real power you have is the ability to choose its direction. Once a moment is gone, it is gone forever. So you have to decide what it's worth before it disappears.